This week on Jerusalem Dateline, Secretary of State Pompeo visits Israel and other nations in the region to expand the peace deal between the United Arab Emirates and the Jewish state, and a report on how the agreement might be an economic boon to both countries, and a rare discovery of an ancient treasure of gold coins. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo visited Israel for talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and alternate Prime Minister Benny Gantz. The meeting was just one stop on a regional trip to encourage more nations to follow the lead of the peace deal between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. Both Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo praised the new peace agreement.
And it has been a boon to peace and to regional stability. I think it heralds a new era where we could have other nations join. We discussed this, and I hope we'll have good news in the future, maybe in the near future.
What's taking place here is deeply consistent with what President Trump set out to do, create a more stable, more prosperous Middle East. This is a really good step in that direction. Economic relationships between the Emirates, opportunities for innovation and science, travel between these two places will now be open.
Former Israeli ambassador to the U.S. Michael Oren called the deal a stunning diplomatic breakthrough.
The agreement overturned, upended 30 years, 50 years, in some cases 70 years of general consensus about the peace process, how to make peace between Israel and the Arab world.
But some in Israel are disappointed that Israel's declaration of sovereignty over parts of its biblical heartland never materialized. That means no annexation of parts of the areas of biblical Judea and Samaria in the area now known as the West Bank. Kushner said that plan was off the table for the foreseeable future. And a key factor in the region, the opposition of Iran and Turkey to the peace deal, as they both condemn the agreement. Some are concerned it might set the stage for a military confrontation in the region. After his visit, Secretary of State Pompeo left Israel on an historic flight, the first ever direct flight from Israel to Sudan. Sudan is one of the Muslim countries that is strengthening ties with Israel. Pompeo continued on his journey to the Gulf states of Bahrain, the UAE, and Oman. His focus was the common threat the Sunni Gulf states face from Iran. Pompeo said he hoped other nations would follow the UAE in establishing ties with Israel, but he left for home without any clear commitments from Sudan, Bahrain, or Oman. Nevertheless, the recent peace deal between Israel and the United Arab Emirates is getting positive reviews, and more countries in the Middle East could also establish ties with the Jewish state sooner rather than later. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl has more on this story.
Whether it's the mutual threat of Iran, COVID-19, or other interests that inspired the Israel-UAE peace deal, investors believe it's just the beginning.
It's the third peace treaty signed between Israel and one of its Arab neighbors. The first one in '79 with Egypt was transformational. Took 15 years to get the second deal done with Jordan in 1994. And now 26 years later, we're doing number 3. But what I can bet you is that it's not going to take 26 years for number 4, 5, and 6.
Venture capitalist Jonathan Medved says Israel is taking its place as a valued member of the region.
We are going to work with perhaps the most progressive and interesting and developed Arab country in the United Arab Emirates on a broad range of interaction, including defense, intelligence, business, startups, tourism, civil aviation.
According to Medved, having a country with that level of sophistication partner with Israel could lead to great things.
I can't wait to develop technologies together with their excellent hospitals and logistics companies and trading companies and construction companies in diverse areas ranging from healthcare to property technology to smart cities to transportation to clean energy.
Medved founder of the crowdfunding platform Our Crowd, knows what he's talking about as he took part at an economic conference last year in Abu Dhabi, capital of the UAE.
They were completely fine with me being open as an Israeli venture capitalist. I said, "You want me to speak about Israel?" And they said, "Absolutely. Why do you think we invited you here? We want you to talk about Israel."
Medved saw signs then that the two countries were moving closer.
What's rare is to find another country that has the same kind of breadth of interest that Israel represents in terms of its startup nation technology prowess.
Medved says while the Israel-UAE deal is a win-win for the two countries, it has the potential to succeed on a higher level.
But ultimately it will be good for the world because this is a major step forward in terms of putting to bed this 72-year-old conflict, which has taken so much attention and cost so much money and lives and sorrow. And we're moving into a new phase where people are saying, you know what? This is not about one side winning or one side losing. This is about accepting reality. And the reality is that Israel is here to stay.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Not everyone is happy about the Israel-UAE deal. Among them, Iran, Turkey, Hezbollah, and Hamas. Along Israel's northern border with Lebanon, the Iranian-backed Hezbollah fired shots at Israeli troops patrolling the area. During the incident, roads were blocked, and Israeli residents of the border communities were instructed to remain inside. Later, Israel Defense Forces aircraft struck Hezbollah observation posts in the area. A military spokesman said he believed the terror squad had positioned itself intentionally between two UN outposts in the hope that an Israeli retaliation would kill UN soldiers. Meanwhile, along Israel's southern border, terrorists are continuing to launch rockets and incendiary balloons into southern Israeli communities. The balloons have started hundreds of wildfires in the area around the Gaza Strip over the last few weeks, burning hundreds of acres of woodlands. Israel has responded by striking Hamas targets in the Gaza Strip. Military sources say they are holding Hamas accountable for all events transpiring from the Gaza Strip. Up next, a report from Saudi Arabia about the historic changes going on inside the Desert Kingdom. It's hoped that nations like Sudan, Bahrain, and Morocco will join the UAE in normalizing relations with Israel. But the most influential nation in the region to make peace would be Saudi Arabia in the heart of the Middle East. Last year, we were one of the first news organizations to report on the major changes going on in the Desert Kingdom. Here's our story from Riyadh on the dramatic economic and social changes that could change the region and its relationship with Israel. The major challenge facing Saudi Arabia is implementing Vision 2030. It's an ambitious plan to change Saudi Arabia from an oil-based economy to one based on business investment, technology, and tourism. CBN sat down with Saudi Arabia's Minister of Economy and Planning, Mohammed Al-Tawashi. Can you describe for us what Vision 2030 is?
The Vision 2030 is basically unlocking this potential of Saudi Arabia, diversifying away from oil, having a sustainable, growing economy, engaging the private sector, creating sustainable jobs for the locals, but also having a regional responsibility and a global responsibility as a good citizen of the world.
Dr. Yonatan Freeman of Hebrew University says Saudi Arabia can learn from Israel.
And I think Saudi Arabia is asking Israel, what's your secret? How could you be so successful internationally using your own mind and not some sort of natural resource? So I think what Saudi Arabia is going to learn from us is how do we move ahead without being dependent on just one natural resource.
One main focus of Vision 2030 is tourism. For the first time in its history, Saudi Arabia is allowing tourists from nearly 50 countries to apply for visas beginning this fall.
Tourism is one pillar where it ticks all the boxes. It ticks the diversification box, it ticks the jobs box, balance of payment, meaning people will come and spend money here.
One tourist attraction for people coming to Saudi Arabia would be here at Al Ula. It's the southern capital of the Nabatean people and a UNESCO heritage site. It was part of the ancient trade routes more than 2,000 years ago. Amir Badani is the CEO of the Al Ula Royal Commission.
A place that hasn't been visited, hasn't been studied, and we are committed to fully understand it, preserve it, and share it with the world through an interpretation strategy that turns Al Ula into a one large, engaging, living museum. This is basically the largest living museum in the world today.
But in addition to economic changes, there are dramatic changes in society. One major change in Saudi society can be seen here at this soccer match. Just more than a year ago, for the first time, women were permitted to attend games of the most popular sport in the country. The stadium includes this family section, where husbands with their wives, mothers with their children, or single women can come and enjoy the game. It's another barrier broken as part of Vision 2030.
In the end, what we're seeing all over the Muslim and Arab world is that more and more the local population wants their countries to push for increasing the welfare of those citizens in their countries, to be more open to the outside world.
But the changes come with challenges.
One thing that Saudi Arabia has to make sure is that the more they open up, it doesn't cause too much of a challenge by those who are opposed to any sort of approachment with the West, approachment with other religions like Christians. So one of the things that the regime has to be certain about is that they do it gradually.
And the threat of Iran overshadows this economic revolution. On September 14th, Iran targeted Saudi Arabia's main oil processing facility. It cut Saudi's oil production drastically for weeks. But the vision expects to change Saudi society, cut dependence on oil, and offer a new Saudi Arabia to the world. Amir Ahmad Banaja is the CEO of the General Entertainment Authority,
which has a very exciting mission, which is to basically build the entertainment sector in Saudi Arabia.
Banaja works on long-term entertainment projects like Qadiyah, a Six Flags amusement park to be built just outside of Riyadh, the Red Sea Project, developing Saudi Arabia's coastline, and Neom, built as a city of the future. Neom, located here on the shores of the Red Sea, is the largest mega project in the world today, with an estimated cost of $500 billion, and it's the centerpiece for Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030, and all part of what Saudi is now opening and offering to the world.
I think that there is a lot to discover about Saudi Arabia and the diversity and colorfulness. I think people think of Saudi Arabia as hot, camels, sand. I think this is very monotonic view. I encourage everybody to think about Saudi Arabia the way you think about the US. California is nothing like Florida, you know. Utah is nothing like Kansas. So there is a lot of beauty and details. I think the world will come to see the largest living museum in the world being unveiled.
Whether or not Saudi Arabia can achieve Vision 2030 or not will deeply affect the future of the Middle East. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Coming up, an ancient treasure in gold coins found by Israeli teenagers. Israeli teenagers helping at an archaeological site have uncovered a rare find. The volunteers came upon a hoard of gold coins that are more than 1,000 years old. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl has that story.
The 24-karat gold coins date back to the Abbasid Islamic Caliphate that stretched from Persia to North Africa. The treasure, discovered by two Israeli teenagers, came while excavating a site in the middle of a neighborhood in the center of Israel.
Today, when they came to work, when they started digging, they saw a glimmer in the ground, and as they continued excavating, they found a large gold hoard in a small jar.
The youths volunteered during their summer holiday before beginning Army service. Oz Cohen is one of the youth.
It was amazing. I dug in the ground, and when I excavated the soil, saw what looked like very thin leaves. When I looked again, I saw these were gold coins. It was really exciting to find such a special and ancient treasure.
Archaeologist Galit Tal says finding gold is rare.
We don't find many gold hoards in archaeological excavations. When we do find them, we don't find individual coins mostly. We usually find them in hoards because gold being gold, people wanted to keep it close, and so they kept it with them.
The hoard contained 425 gold coins.
The way the gold was buried was obviously done by someone who was in a rush to leave, and so he buried it in the ground. He covered it with the intention of returning to pick it up later, and as you can see, obviously, he never did.
This dig is in what would have been a large industrial area that included wine presses and pottery kilns.
The unique thing about this gold hoard is that it shows us a lot about international commerce of that time period in the area, which was on the rise and prospering, as opposed to the commerce in Europe at the time, where the use of gold actually started dwindling.
From the initial examination, experts say most of the coins date to the end of the 9th century BC. The stash weighed nearly 2 pounds, which would have been a lot of money back then.
It's difficult to tell what you could buy with the coins, but most likely with one coin you could buy some sort of large farm animal like a cow or a horse. And with a hoard of this size, it's likely that you could also buy a large house or mansion in this time period.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Up next, the launching of 2 websites to provide news and information about the Middle East. Best-selling author and Middle East expert Joel Rosenberg is launching 2 news websites, All Israel News and All Arab News. He and his colleague Halil Saeg, senior correspondent for All Arab News, told CBN News why these websites are important at this time in the Middle East.
We're excited about the launch of these 2 new websites, All Israel News and All Arab News, because I think that there's a gap in coverage right now in the Middle East. There's not a website, or in this case 2, that create a one-stop shopping for all the interesting news, credible, important, controversial news that's already being reported in the region, along with original reporting, exclusive interviews, even polling. And you know, CBN News does a great job, but not everybody knows that there's other things like in the Jerusalem Post and the Times of Israel and in Arab papers. And so most Christians don't have time to go sifting through 20 Israeli news sites, 20 or 30 Arab news sites, in addition to CBN News and others, and say, what are the main stories? What's driving the agenda? What should I know about? And how can I be more informed so I can pray for the people of the region, for the church in the region? And so All Israel News and All Arab News is designed to link to all the most interesting stories, but also provide original content. Now, why 2? Why All Israel News and All Arab News? As I've been traveling around building relationships with Arab Muslim leaders, also Arab Christian leaders, and others in the region, many of them are not quite ready to be interviewed, quoted, or profiled on a site called All Israel News. They're just not there yet. Maybe the United Arab Emirates is closer, but most people are not. And Arab Christians particularly struggle because it's hard enough to be a follower of Jesus in the region. To be seen as maybe supportive of Israel in some way is a bridge too far. So we basically created 2 sites. They'll be cross-linked. So big stories on one will be cross-linked to the other. But our Arab Muslim and Arab Christian friends and others in the region can be quoted and profiled and interviewed on the All Arab News site.
All Arab News is a news website that does interviews, write original articles and stories about the Middle East and the Arab world. The Arab world and the Middle East is really such a rich region with its history, culture, and even its politics. And we are witnessing that there is a growing interest in the evangelical community around the globe on this particular region. So we want to provide an interesting interviews, relevant stories and news that will link from other websites. So it would be just a place for an evangelical Christian to get his news, opinions about the Middle East and the region. So in particular, we would like to reach our fellow evangelical Christians around the world, but not exclusively these people. We would like to reach Muslims, Jews, and people who are around the globe who have interest of the Middle East, its culture, history, and current political events. My perspective as a Palestinian evangelical Christian would be unique for a lot of people. It would be different from many voices you hear in the mainstream media because not a lot of news sites are interested in hearing a minority's perspective. But we would like to bring these perspectives to the to the world.
Over the years, one of our most important partners that broadcasts Jerusalem Dateline has been Alpha Omega TV in Romania. Its founder, Tudor Patan, sent this video congratulating CBN News on our 20th anniversary of broadcasting from Israel.
Dear member of CBN News office, greetings from Romania, from Alpha Omega TV, and congratulations for this special anniversary.
Hello everyone, welcome to this week's edition of Christian World News.
Bine ați venit la această ediție a emisiunii Mapamont Creștin.
As you know, from 2002 we are using stories produced by you, including in the Christian World News, the weekly news magazine that we are producing here as a Romanian version of Mapamont Creștin. And from that time, every week we have something from Israel, from the Middle East, in this program, Christian World News Romanian version.
This week on Jerusalem Dateline.
From spring 2014, we are airing in Romania with Romanian subtitling your show, Jerusalem Dateline. It's an important show, a key show, a source of credible information from Israel and from the Middle East. I'm traveling a lot, and people said, finally watching stories, news from the Middle East, from Israel, we understand what's happened there, what's happened in the Middle East, what's God's plan for end time. And this is an important tool for us, an important program and direction for us to present what God is doing in Israel and what is His plan for end time. And again, thank you for what we are doing for us. Thank you for what we are doing for Romania. You are an important part of God's plan for body of Christ here in Romania. Many times God is speaking us to pray for you. I don't know what, you're traveling a lot in the Middle East. I know you need protection, guidance, and favor and resources. So we are praying here at Alpha Omega for you. And you are in our prayer. And once again, many thanks for what you are doing for us here in Romania and for many other nations. And may God bless you, and special greetings for this special anniversary.
We deeply appreciate Tudor, his wife Mirella, and the whole Alpha Omega team in Romania. Thank you for your partnership throughout the years. Shalom, and God bless you all. Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time.